Do you know how banks work? Because a lot of people don't understand how money flows and where it goes and why. But everybody wants to get rich. But you don't even know how money itself works. You might say, oh, yeah, okay, I invest here, I put it in there, and I get money from here because I invest and they give me back. No. You need to understand the fundamentals if you want to understand why people invest, how they invest, and how you actually get rich. So I'm going to start off with this one company in Silicon Valley because they were in, right? They started this AI company, which was basically, since you're in Silicon Valley, right? Like you have all these tech companies, they just start, they go out, they do a bunch of stuff, right? And especially AI is booming right now. So these guys are okay, let's try and combine it with Photoshop and let's try and combine it with Premiere Pro, like these editing softwares to try and make a profit out of it because right now the tech industry is booming. So they go into this AI studio thing and they really work on it. They code day and night. They try to get whatever they can out. They really put all of their energy into it. The founders, the three, four, five employees that are working on it. But the problem was they needed funding. They needed someone to help them get to their goals because they needed more employees. They needed to pay those employees who didn't have a place to live in the expensive San Francisco rents or homes. They had to sleep at the office. That's how broke they were. But they had a dream, they had a mission, they had a goal, and they wanted to get there. So they went out and they went to venture capitalists. Venture capitalists, it's a hard word to say. And these are basically people who invest in companies if they think they'll do good. So for example, Airbnb had a lot of investments. If you don't know what that is, it's like hotels, but you can book them online. So it's like virtual hotel booking, but people use their own homes as hotels. So basically venture capitalists saw, okay, this is a wonderful idea. They invest inside of that company, so they invest inside Airbnb. And if Airbnb does really good, the venture capitalists get really, really, really rich. If you know Naval Ravikant, or even if you know Tim Ferriss, they were one of the first people to invest in Airbnb because they knew this was something that's going to do amazing. Same with Uber. People, the venture capitalists invest in Uber, they're like, oh yeah, okay, if I invest in this, maybe I'll get rich, maybe I won't. There's a lot of companies where people get broke as well. So this company, this small group of people went out and they're like, okay, we have this AI studio software. And basically what we do, we integrate it for people who are directors or editors or, people in the video industry because we see that it's really blowing up. And so they really pitch it to a lot of people. And two or three venture capitalists think it's an amazing idea and that it will do amazing. So they're like, okay, here is $5 million we'll put towards your cause, even though they were initially asking for only 100,000. $5 million. They were set. They knew exactly where they wanted to go. They knew for the future, we know exactly what we're gonna do. And so for a month, they worked hard. They were so happy that they had this. They were grateful for the opportunity they were given, and they didn't want to let their investors down. But one day, a month after, they weren't able to access their bank. All of a sudden, they went on the Silicon Valley Bank app and they realized that it said, we are unable to open this app. Please contact customer service. So they called customer service, but it was a 12-hour wait time. This had happened to everyone at that bank. Everyone was struggling to access their money. And it's been like this for the past 3 days, and this is a real story. This company is real. You can search it up. I don't know the founder's name, but it's called AI Studio. And recently, a bank called SVB Bank got completely demolished. And one reason is because a lot of people don't understand how money works. And the second reason is because they lent out more than they could give out. So let me explain what happened with this recent Silicon Valley Bank, or I'm going to call it SVB Bank failure. And I'm going to have to explain how banks work pretty normally to you if you want to understand this. So when I was smaller, I always wondered how banks made money. I'm like, okay, does the government run the bank? Then I was wrong. I'm like, okay, there's private banks. There's Bank of America, right? There's a bunch of banks. Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, right? All these things are banks. So I'm like, okay, how do they make money? Turns out that when someone takes a deposit, or sorry, a loan from the bank, they the bank lends out money to the people, and the people have to pay interest back on that money. So that means, for example, if I take 100,000 out from the bank, I'm like, okay, I want to buy this, and they approve my loan, which means that they think, okay, based on your income and based on where you're doing, what company you're working at, all that stuff, right? They think, okay, you are a valuable person. I think it is worth lending out $100,000 to you. Here you go. And you might think that's a large amount, but the numbers I'm about to show to you are just, it's just crazy. So I take 100,000, and they're like, okay, you took 100,000 from us. You basically borrowed from us. If you want to pay it back and you want to take this 100,000, you have to give us back 1.2% interest. So that means that we have to give back 1% of what they lent to us. So, for example, 1% of, or 1.2% of 100,000 is about $1,200. So, if I take this loan, I have to pay back $101,200 back to the bank, and that's how they make profit, right? Now think of this adding up on a scale of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. You might think, okay, banks making $1,000 on, $100,000 loans, like it's not a huge thing. How do they get the money in the first place? That's when people put their money in there to store, right? People put their money in banks so that banks could store it safely for them. They put it in there so that banks will be like, okay, we're gonna keep your money safe. We're gonna make sure that it doesn't go anywhere. You can access it at any time, and that's kind of the benefit that they give you. But what people don't know is that this money that you've kind of given the banks is basically paying them. You're paying the banks because technically the money's not in your hands anymore. Sure, you may have a bank account and you may have account number and you may have a name under that money, but the banks can use that money as they please. So if you have $1 million in the bank and someone else has $1 million, and say they have a million customers each with, let's say, a total combined of $1 billion, right? If they all have that $1 billion in the bank and no one withdraws anything, the bank is worth $1 billion. Now, what can they do with this money? They can put it anywhere. They can invest it. They can go ahead and put it in bonds. They can go gamble it somewhere, right? But of course, if they gamble it, if they lose it, bro, like, no one's gonna come to your bank. Like, you're broke. You're done. You're sent to jail. And that's what happened with crypto, but that's a different discussion. So basically, people put their money in. They're like, okay, here's the money. Hold it safe for me. And the bank's like, okay, thank you, and they keep it. And the way they make money is through interest. So people keep on paying back to them, and the banks can do whatever they want with the money. So now that they have this money, people sometimes want to withdraw, right? And sometimes the bank also wants to invest. So they have this mathematical kind of relationship. They're like, okay, at what point in time would X amount of people want to withdraw money based on the economy, based on inflation, based on all the things that you kind of hear in the news, right? It's like, okay, there's an inflation rate at 9%, right? Well, the bank's like, okay, maybe we should invest less and keep more money in our bank so that more people can withdraw if they need it, because they know a lot of withdrawals are going to be coming, especially in COVID. A lot of people withdrawed money. So if you have this time period where it's like kind of rough, what this is called fractional reserve banking, where basically they take a fraction of the money that they have. So say for example, it's that same 1 billion. They only take 10% of that, only invest that 10%. They will never go above that 10%. Whatever profit they make on that 10% is theirs, minus taxes they have to pay to the government, right? All that stuff. So they keep that 10%, right? But say for example, inflation is really high and it was a bad recession. They'll probably drop that percentage rate to maybe 6, maybe 5, maybe 7, right? They have to drop it down because more people will be withdrawing. And if you don't have money to give to people and they want to withdraw it, even though their bank balance says 1 million, but you're playing around with, say, their entire million and they want to pull out 100,000, you're not able to pay them that 100,000 because you've played with all their money. It's all in investments, all in bonds, all in stocks, right? You can't do anything with that. So basically, they use these deposits of people's money to buy these bonds, and bonds are kind of like exchange with the government. They're like, okay, government, here is, or sorry, Biden, I don't know, whoever's in government, here is $1 million, right? And the government's like, okay, we have a bond, we will pay you 1% yield, which is kind of 1% on that money on top of what you've invested for us back to you. Now, bonds usually come out to the public when there's a dire need for it. Sometimes it's just in general, right? So the government's only one source of income is taxes. The only way they make income is taxes, and taxes bring in a lot of income. But sometimes they need to spend more than tax money is bringing in. And this happened during, I'm going to bring back to the pandemic again, right? When people they had to print stimulus checks to give to people who were unemployed. They printed a lot of money. And taxes weren't enough to cover for that. So say for example there were 5 trillion paid in taxes. They had to pay out 6.5 trillion in stimulus checks alone, on top of all the other things, right? So they're like, okay, all of a sudden we need a bunch of money. So how are we supposed to get this money? Put out more bonds. If we can get the public to invest in the government, then all of a sudden we'll have more money. We'll be able to do it, right? So banks are usually the biggest buyers. There's also people, the general public, could also invest in bonds. And basically they're like, okay, here government is $1 million. You'll pay me back 1% every 6 months. So that's how the people or the banks make a profit from them. But the problem is most of these bonds get people locked in them. So you have to do it for a minimum amount of years. So if you've ever heard of mortgages, right? You have to do it for a minimum amount of years, be it 15, 20, 25, 30 years. Usually people take 30-year ones. And you kind of have to pay it unless you sell that house. But with government bonds, you can't take it away. It has to be a minimum of 1 to 2 or 3 years, whatever amount you put in. So what happened was that most of these SVB investments, so Silicon Valley Bank, we're going to go back to again, they didn't just have 10%, right, of their fractional reserve banking. Remember, that's the amount that they can invest. So say their total net worth was around 200 billion, right, something like that. They had this amount of value because all of these companies were from Silicon Valley, and because tech was booming, right? All of these companies got huge investments. Like we saw with that one AI studio example, they got a lot of money from investors. All these angel investors, all these venture capitalists are like, yeah, this company's probably going to do good. And they say that to a lot of companies, so a lot of them don't do good. But what happens is these valuations are gigantic. And most of the times, these companies that are technology companies are operating at a loss. So every dollar they put into the business or into the product, they can only make 75 cents back because they have 5 million ready, just sitting there, right? They can pay their employees, they can help out whatever they need, right? Build the product. And then in the future, they start leveling up their process, they start making more money. But problem is, when a recession hits, the products don't really make money anymore. So they kind of have to go to the banks and be like, okay, I need my money back because I really got to live here and my employees are struggling and our products aren't selling. So they're not just making 75 cents on that dollar they're putting into the business. They're making maybe 30 cents, maybe 40 cents because they're barely selling anything. So what happened was in SVB, a lot of these companies were looking for money back because the pandemic hit, and this is exactly what happened. Everybody had to pull their money out. But the problem was SVB had invested not just 10%, not just 15, 20, 30%. They'd invested, what was it, 90 billion out of 200? They'd invested literally 45% of the money that people put into the bank into bonds. I just told you about bonds. Bonds make it so that you're locked into the investment. You can't leave it for a year or 2 years or 3 years. And that's the one that SVB signed up for. Because they're like, okay, but I'm going to get rich. Because interest rate at the time were really high. The government really, really, really needed money. Because, they printed so many stimulus checks that they're like, okay, guys, maybe we're going to up interest rates. We'll pay you more if you buy into the government, if you pay us more. So a lot of people bought into that. And they paid for a 1.56% yield interest rate. But what they didn't know is that was in 2020, 2021, right? But what they didn't know is that 2 years later, the interest rate would probably hit 4 to 5%. So that means that if I went into the bond, which was like, say I put in 100,000 into that 1.5% interest rate, right? That means I give them $100,000, they give me back $101,000 and 500. I hope I'm saying that right. $101,500, right? They give me back every 6 months. Sorry, not every 6 months. Every 6 months they give you back 1,500, and it's just over and over. It's just 1.5% of the initial investment you put in. Now, if I put it in and I get a 5% return, 5% is huge. That's rare. That's almost never happened. That means I'm getting back 5,000 every 6 months compared to the 1.5 thousand every 6 months. So which one do you think would have a higher value? Which one would people be willing to pay more money into? It'd be the 5% interest rate. So what happened was SVB bought back in 2020, 2021 when they thought, okay, this is the highest it's going to be. They bet on that. But then it went higher. So the value of the 1.6% bond dropped. Nobody wanted to buy it because there were higher interest rate ones. There were ones that would pay much more back to the individuals who invest into it. So nobody wanted to buy the 1.56 over the 5%. That's literally throwing away money. So what happened was they were stuck into this investment and they were losing money because the bonds weren't worth it. No one wanted to buy the bonds. And they were stuck in it, and it was 90 billion. So people at this time were trying to withdraw all this money. This is all a system. This is all coming together. People out were trying to withdraw money, right? And the bank couldn't give them money because most of it was inside of those bonds, which they couldn't take out from the government. It was something that they signed. Like, okay, we won't take it out for 3 years because we said so, because we think this is worth it. And so SVB is like, okay, maybe it's going to be fine. The economy's going to be better, right? It was not better. And so now the value of SVB was dropping, right? But they needed to give cash to the people who were in their bank in case of withdrawals. And people were withdrawing. But they were never able to pay it off. And right now, as we speak, like as this is going on right now, there are lines outside of SVB of people demanding money. SVB has lost $40 billion in a valuation in the last few days and is constantly dropping. And what's scary is that they knew this would happen. About 2 weeks ago, the CEO and the top executives sold the majority of their shares before this happened because they knew they were stuck. They knew it. They didn't share it with the public. And now all of these tech startups you know of, and a big example was Roku. If you know Roku, right? They're like these little purple, if you know, it's like those TVs, you hook it up and it has like it's a little sound effect. You can like go just sift through it, right? So it's a really interesting company, right? It did really good. And most of its money came from SVB. And now most of its money is stuck in SVB, almost $500 million. I think it was something like 27% of its total like net worth of Roku was inside SVB, which had just collapsed. Now what's going to happen to Roku stock? And that's just one company that came out of Silicon Valley. Think of all the big companies, all the tech companies that were from Silicon Valley who invested in Silicon Valley Bank that are losing all their money right now. And this takes us back to that AI studio example. A company that thought, oh, we have $5 million. We'll be able to pay our employees and we'll be able to invest in our product infinitely for the next few months, for the next few years. We are covered. Let's try and figure this stuff out. Let's try and see how we can sell. And so they played it safe. They sold at a loss. They sold at 75 cents per $1 they were putting into the business. But now they're locked out of their bank. And no one can give them money. So now they're at a loss. They can't pay their employees. And they can't access their money. And this can happen with any bank. But the big ones are probably safer. And this takes me to the idea of money being like water. It's always constantly moving. Money is not always in one place. You think you put the money into the bank. I just told you that they invest it further into different places. Now, let's take the average income maker, for example. Let's say you are a software engineer. You're making $100,000 per year. Cool, wonderful. You have a nice, solid income, right? You're doing pretty good. And now you go out, you go on a date with some ugly girl, right? Whatever, it's your first time going out with a girl. You actually pulled out the courage to talk to her, right? That's cool. Good job. Good job. So you take her out and you go to a nice restaurant. You go to Nobu up in Toronto, right? So you're like, okay, I want to spend a good night with her. I want to make sure she has a good dinner. So you spend $500 that night on dinner. You make sure she has a wonderful night. You make sure everything's set up. You have the perfect seats, a nice view outside of the city, and it's just a beautiful night. So you use your American Express card to tap right on that credit card machine. It goes in, transaction approved. Money goes straight to the business. Now we're going to follow the money. I don't care about you and your girlfriend, right? You're probably going to break up in a year. you go straight to the bank, right? The money goes straight to the business. And so the business has $500 in profit just from you. Now let's follow this $500, right? The business has this $500, but now they have to pay their employees because it's close to the end of the month where they have to give out their, their monthly checks of payment. So this $500, let's say that 100 of it goes to one of the servants that actually gave the loser, sorry, you're the loser, with the loser girlfriend, who's going to break up in a year, and told him to pay, right? He has to get paid as well. So we pay to that employee. Now the employee is aspiring to get rich. He starts investing. He starts putting his money into bank. He really wants to save his money so that he can get rich. So he takes that, well, 100 is just a part of it. So he takes his $2,000 total check, which he gathered from all the different transactions that the business gave him, right? The business had a bunch of transactions, not from you, $500, some idiot spending $500 on dinner. There's like 400 other people that night. So a total, think of like 400 and 500 is average in like a really good restaurant. I'm not going to do that math, big number. So the business splits that money up and this employee gets $2,000 in total, end of the month. Amazing. Now he wants to take 50% of that, which is $1,000, and save it because, he doesn't need to spend much. He just lives at his house. He's just living with his parents, right? It's fine. Takes this $1,000, he puts it in the bank. I'm going to save it for later. I'm going to make sure I can use it, right? I want to set up my future self so that, I have something to live with. Money goes straight to the bank. Now bank's like, okay, I'm going to go and invest this because remember I told you like they can invest the money, right? Based on fractional reserve banking, sorry. And I'm going to go invest it into, let's say, this Apple stock, right? Because I think Apple stock is going to do amazing. And so Apple gets this money from the bank because the bank's like, okay, they're going to bet on this company because they think Apple is going to do really, really good in the future, right? So they're betting on Apple's future. Now, Apple has $1,000 that it can use, or not even 1,000. Let's say the bank invests $1 million into this Apple company, right? Now, Apple all of a sudden has $1 million in its evaluation, right? Not direct income, but in its evaluation that it can use. Now, let's say Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, decides to sell $1 million of shares, just by coincidence. Like, I don't know, maybe he just wanted to sell $1 million. So he does. Now, he wants to give some money out to his employees, right? Because we really have to pay these employees. We have to make sure they get some income too. And, he has employees at every level. There's an executive level. There's so many. And he's pay all these people who all have different transactions that they have to make. They have to pay off their homes, their mortgages, all that stuff. But he gives this to this one software engineer. And this one software engineer decides that he wants to go out the next day and get a date night with his new girlfriend because the first one went really well. You see how this all comes back into a full circle? This is all money being water. Money is fluid. It's always moving. There's no one place money will ever stay. Even if you have a whole set of cash in your wallet right now, the value of that money is constantly changing. Even though it's not a crazy amount, right? It's not even an amount you can probably calculate, but it's always changing. It's always going to different people. And it ends up in a loop. The world runs on credit and on purchases. You go out and you buy something, that gives it to the business, which needs to give it to its employees, which go out and buy something, which need to give it to its business, which goes out and buys something and needs to pay to its employees. I just got the order messed up. That's how confusing it is. But it's this entire system that just comes together and makes it so that everyone gets paid something. Money is always flowing. The idea is a lot of people don't know where to stand to capture that water. A lot of people don't know where that money is going. I just told you banks put it in one place, right? Businesses need to pay to their employees. But there's so much other stuff that you can make, or especially get, that will give you a lot of money. And this will take me to the concept of time being money. People believe that time is money. You've probably heard that a bunch, right? Oh, you're wasting time, you're losing money. Yeah, probably. But I don't think that's how it works, especially in this age. And I'm gonna explain something, an idea by the man named Naval Ravikant. He, sorry, not cunt, Kant. I don't know how to say his name, bro. Sorry, I don't want to call you a cunt. I really want to meet you, bro. You're my fan. I mean, I'm your fan. So, the idea is time is not money. Time has never been and never will be money. Me and you probably work the exact same amount in the same day. But if you're out there working 8 hours at a restaurant shift and I'm here working 8 hours on my business, I will have a higher return than you. But the problem is the time I put into this is not valuable at all. It's the effort I get out of it. The difference is you're working in the physical domain, I'm working in the intellectual domain. So I'm going to give you a YouTube example. Let's say I'm running a YouTube channel, right? And I really want this channel to do good. So when I first start out, I put out a bunch of videos. I'm trying to learn, okay, how do I get comfortable in front of the camera? How do I figure out how to tell stories? How do I make it so that people really want to watch my videos? How do I create engagement? All this stuff. There's just so much stuff that it's in YouTube business, right? And, over time, let's say I've been doing it for a year, I learn about a lot of the fundamentals. I understand how to keep people on videos. I understand how stories work. I understand how to really get comfortable with the camera. Don't get too comfortable with the camera. And this means that I also know what gets the highest return. There's this quote by Naval himself. He said that in the physical domain, most of effort is required. That means most of the effort you put into, say, for example, working out, is something that will probably get you muscle. If you work out a lot, like you're gonna get a bunch of muscle. If you do like 3 or 4 sets, you're not gonna get too much muscle. But in the intellectual domain, in domains working like software engineers, like YouTubers, like anyone in media or in code, they are wasting most of their effort. 99%, literally, he said this, 99% of their effort is wasted. Only 1% of it matters. Oh, God. Now you might say, okay, was it really wasted if you learned a bunch of stuff, if you really understood the fundamentals? Sure, you can say that's different, right? But we're not talking about words here. We're talking about the idea. When he says most effort is wasted, he means that most of the videos you'll put out, most of the ideas you record, most of the ways you try to experiment with storytelling are just plain stupid. They don't matter. But think of when you go to the gym. When you go to the gym, if you literally just run on a treadmill, you're gaining muscle. You don't need to lift weights to gain muscle. There are multiple different ways to gain muscle. Lifting weights is just the most effective way the human species has found so far. In the future, you might have something that's a little bit faster, right? You probably don't want to lift logs to try and gain muscle. You probably want to lift weights because it's much more effective. It's easier to grab. It's just easier in every way. The future would probably have something different. But in that, volume really matters. The amount of effort you put into the physical domain truly matters. Volume matters. In the intellectual domain, effectiveness matters. Leverage matters. And this is a really important word. Leverage is basically the amount of return you get based on the effort you put in. So remember before I said time is not money. This is kind of where I start explaining this, because most of the time, if you're working on the right things, you don't need to work on it much to get to that point. And this is an idea a lot of people struggle to understand. Now, say for example, I struck upon a banger idea for a video. Like, I'm like, okay, this is gonna go extremely viral, and I just know. And it comes after I sit down and I brainstorm 1,000 ideas. It takes me literally the entire day. I'm just sitting there and I'm brainstorming ideas. And out of all of those ideas, I sit down, I'm like, okay, let me pick this one. Out of all those 1,000, I had to cut it down to 100, and then I cut it down to 10, and then I only picked one. One out of 1,000 ideas. That one is the best you can ever think of. And then you're like, let me make a video on this. So then you start scripting it, you start doing it really good, and you put the video out, and it goes crazy viral. Now, imagine if you sat there and you did the first idea that came to your mind. First idea, you're like, okay, let's make a video on cheesecake. Okay, cool, let's do cheesecake. because you couldn't think of any ideas. You're like, okay, I'm gonna relate this to the physical domain because maybe volume just matters. Maybe I just need to get a lot of stuff out. Maybe I just need to be consistent and just get it out once a day, some videos, and I'll do good. But none of them do good. Nobody wants to watch your videos on cheesecake. So you upload week one, you upload the first day, like, wait, cheesecake, video, let's get it out. Cool, it's out. 3 views. You suck. Now, second idea, let's make a video on pancakes. Okay, then you make the video on pancakes, it's out the same day. You put in a bunch of work, you put in a bunch of editing, you put in so much effort into it. 5 views. So then you're like, oh, maybe I just need to upload more consistently. So you do that over and over and over and over. And remember, it's 1,000 ideas. It's 1,000 ideas you have to iterate to before you get to that good one. Now, let's say that good idea that previously went viral, crazy viral, let's say it got 10 million views. Let's say that idea is the 647th idea, right? So you wrote down all these ideas, right, in a notebook. Let's say you wrote down 1,000. It's the 647th idea. You're like, this one is amazing. You upload it, 10 million views, okay? Right? You remember that. So now you're going to have to sift through 647 videos if you upload one every single day just to get to that one good idea that actually went viral. Do you understand what I mean by most of effort? 99% of effort is wasted. All of those videos you made, the 647 you uploaded per day, by the way, that's about 2 years, was wasted. Sure, you might have learned some editing techniques. Sure, you maybe have learned how to upload consistently, how to manage your work ethic, right? You learned how to work hard. But that doesn't matter in the intellectual domain, the domain that matters with the mind. Money is no longer earned through hours put in. You can't get rich renting out your time. Naval said all of this. He's a genius. You will never get rich renting out your time. You can never say, I'm going to put in 8 hours of work, I'll get in 8 hours of output. That's not how it works anymore. If you have leverage, if you're working on the right things, if you have something that can help you, you can 1, 10, 100,000, 10,000x your returns. I'll kind of explain this in the software engineering domain, right? So software engineering is another intellectual job. You kind of have to be creative. You can make any code you want. You can make it however you want, right? You can organize it any way. Now, you could go to a company and they tell you what to code. They say, okay, code this, fix these errors, right? Do that, right? This is usually what happens with most software engineers. Most of them don't really do anything. But let's say you know coding. You know the Python coding language. And you're a fresh graduate out of university. You're like, okay, I have a degree in computer science and I know how to code in Python. I really want to start a company. So you sit there, 1,000 ideas. You take your time and you really write it out. Okay, what can I make as code that can solve the world's problems? So, okay, maybe I can code a chair that can automatically adjust based on your back pain. Okay, that sounds cool, right? Maybe I can adjust a screen that changes every few hours to make it so that you get up, or maybe it changes to adapt to your eyes, right? Okay, that's another cool piece of code. And you keep on sifting through these ideas till all of a sudden you stumble upon one. You're like, okay, I really want to make something where people can digitally transact money. I want to make something where people might be able to, transact without using banks, without going to these centralized systems. And you really get into it. You take a few weeks, a few months, a year to code that digital transaction thing. Because out of 1,000 ideas, you truly thought it was the best. And then you put your all into it. You release it to the public. You tell a few of your friends, you're like, I made this thing. We can transact through the internet. You can send money through emails. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's cool. Let's try it. It works for them. They really love it. Then more and more people get onto it. People invest their money in. And since you have majority stake in this coin, in this money, you feel like, okay, I will probably make money if I put a lot of effort into this. This was the invention of Bitcoin. The guy who put in all of that hours of coding, at least no one knows him. And this is really interesting. No one knows who invented Bitcoin, but we know his name was Satoshi Nakamoto. Probably some Japanese guy, I don't know. Hopefully I said his name right. And his net worth is probably somewhere in the billions. He coded one thing, and his net worth is probably close to 40, 50, 60 billion dollars. Think of that. 1 year of work on one thing accounted to literally a 1 billion times return. He put nearly no money into it. All him. Now think how many other things there are. How many other things people have coded or made videos on that have made so much money. A literal 1 billion% return. There are a lot of examples like this out there. And this really tells you that time is not money. Even though I'm saying he put 1 year into it, the thing he worked on was much more important than how much time he put into it. If he just did that and say he only got 50% of it right, even if he got 1% of it right, he would have still made millions. 1% of 50 billion, how much is that? Probably like 5 million, I don't know. 5 million, 500 million, 50 million. That's enough to satisfy anyone for a lifetime. Do not think of your intellectual money, which is probably what you're going to work on in the future, as something that requires work all the time. It's not about volume. It's truly, truly about effectiveness. Learning, school teaches you it's about volume. Oh, here's more practice problems. Oh, here's another test. Oh, here I'm going to test you on this. Oh, let's put in more effort. Let's try harder. Take more SAT practice tests. Do all this stuff. School teaches you volume matters. I'm telling you, the rich will tell you the thing you're working on, who you do it with, and how you do it matters more than how hard you work. Now, this doesn't mean you should stop working hard, because all the people at the top worked hard as well. Combine hard work with working with the right things, the right people, and you will have a successful business. You will. Every single time, if you want to see what millionaires, billionaires have done, that's what they've done. They worked with the right people, with the right skill sets, right? They worked on the right things, and they worked quite hard on it, and that got them really far. But this is interesting, because now that I told you that time is not money, I also need to tell you that no one really owns anything at all. Because if you own a home, or even if your parents own a home, right? Like whoever owns something, you don't really own it. If you run out of an income tomorrow, that home will not be yours. The bank's gonna say, oh, you kind of gotta pay me the mortgage, and you kind of gotta give me all this stuff, so I'm just gonna take your house from you, and I'm gonna take all the stuff from you, maybe your car, maybe that $1 million jacket you bought. I don't know who has a $1 million jacket, but I'm just gonna take it, right? Because you can't pay me the stuff. Now you own nothing. Not even the own clothes on your back, the $1 million jacket you have. I don't know who's buying that. Nothing anyone owns is truly owned by anyone unless it's stock or a piece of another business. Because businesses are not true entities. Think about it like this. We say that we're gonna Google it. Well, what is Google? Is there a physical thing I can hold that's a Google? Like, I can feel a car. Like, I know what a car is. I can feel a house. Like, I'm in a house right now. I can feel this microphone. I can feel the microphone. But how do I feel Google? I mean, I could go to the CEO and start assaulting him, right? Like, I'm just gonna feel you. But he's not Google. Google is a legal entity. He's just see, I'm even personifying it. We try to personify these things usually in today's world that aren't even real. Tesla. You have a Tesla. What's a Tesla? I can't say I have a Tesla. You have a car. Sure, it's called Tesla, but you don't have a Tesla. You have a car that's made by Tesla. But what is Tesla? Tesla's a legal entity that has a valuation of, how much was it? $1 trillion? However much it was. I have an iPhone. What's an iPhone? This is just a phone. Oh, iPhone is from Apple. Oh, what's Apple? Apple? A lot of the things that you own are not really things. The only things that are things are businesses. Pieces of businesses are the best things you can own to get rich. Stocks. Now, of course, there's businesses you can own yourself And it's not just you investing in stocks to make you rich. If you have your own business that you have a majority stake in, that will make you rich too. And this is how where I start explaining stocks. So let's say you start a business, right? And this business is worth $1 million. And you say, I'm going to issue 50% of the stock to myself. So you are a majority shareholder in the stock. Now, a lot of big companies don't do this anymore, right? But let's just say you're 50%, 51%, let's just say, of the holder in the stock. And let's call it Beneat Singh LLC, whatever, right? So you run this business and you start working really hard on it, right? You really want it to do good. You do the right things, remember? You do the right things and you do it with the right people for a long enough period of time. You sift through a bunch of ideas, you pick one that you think is amazing, and you work on it for a long time. So now you're going through this stuff, right? You're really trying to learn, okay, how can I make this business better? How can I make more money? And you really do good. Starts off at $1 million. People want to invest into it. People really want to buy your stock. So they think, okay, let me buy pieces of this market. Let me try and see how much better it is. So people start investing. They start putting money into it. They start buying your product. Let's say the product is, I don't know, what can I sell? Let's just say I'm selling burgers, right? I'm selling burgers. People want to buy my burgers. My burgers are nice. Now every person who buys my burgers, $5. So $5 now, the value of the company is $1 million and five. Now $5 more, $1 million and 10. Right now, people keep on buying. Right? Let's say we get 100,000 customers every single day. Right? Cool. That's 500,000 per day. Wow, that's a lot. 500,000 per day, and this probably happens like 5 years down the line in the business, right? And so if I'm making 500,000 per day, the value of the company keeps on going up, but that means the value of my stock is also exponentially going up along with that. So if I had 50% ownership, majority of ownership within that company, and making $500,000 per day, in about 2 days, my net worth would be around 1 million. Jumped from 500,000. And this is why you see Elon Musk's, this is why you see Jeff Bezos, all these people's net worth jump so fast. Because at the peak of the pandemic, or whenever the peak of all the stock markets were during this time, Tesla's market share, it got short squeezed, which, that's a different topic, right? People basically betting down on the stock, and they thought, it's going to go down, it's going to do really bad. Turns out it didn't do bad. Tesla sold a bunch of cars, and it did really good. The short sellers, which are people who are betting down, they lost the bet, so they had to pay money to the people who were betting it would go up, which is normal stock buying. And so the stock went up like crazy. So the stock goes up like crazy. Elon Musk, who has a pretty large, I don't know about majority, he has a pretty large shareholding in Tesla, his net worth flies up. He didn't do anything interesting. He never did anything crazy. He just sold more cars. But now he's worth $300 billion. At the peak of that, he was worth $300 billion. And that's when his company was worth around 1 point something trillion dollars, right? So even if he has, let's say, a 20% shareholding in the company, if his company was worth $1 trillion, right, which I think it was, then he would be worth $200 billion. And that means that every time the company's value changes, his income changes as well. Not even his income, just his stock value. He's not making any money. If you look at his record filings, because all these filings are public, right? If you look at how much Elon Musk made in the year of 2020 and 2021, he wrote he made $0 because he did make $0. All he has to do is just sell his own stock and then he can live. And what's interesting is if you sell a certain amount of stock, you don't have to pay taxes. That's a different thing, right? But basically, tying this into no one owns anything, he doesn't own that $300 billion until he sells all of his stock. If he sells off his stock, which is stupid, all his whole company would just die out. He'd have to pay taxes on that 300 billion, which is probably like just 150 billion alone just to the government, right? So that's just stupid. But he never owns that. He's not really worth 300 billion. Neither is he worth the 50,000 his home costs. If his company just all of a sudden just stopped tomorrow, he'd be worth $50,000. That 300 billion is gone. Vanished because it never existed. No one owns anything, and money is fluid. It's always moving. He might have $300 under the Elon Musk bank name, under the Federal Reserve's bank name. But if his company, if Tesla the thing, the company, just goes away. His income goes away. It's no longer under his name. He doesn't own that stock anymore. But what's interesting is if you want to get rich, you also have to buy that stock even though the money isn't real. So here's the idea. Most of the time when people say they're rich, they're wealthy, they don't really own that money. That money is just under their name. This is a really interesting insight. Because most people think wealthy or rich means, oh, I have a stack of cash. So, Lil Durk in his music video, he just has like $4,000. No, that's not rich. That's not rich. He owns the money, right? That's literal physical cash. But it's not his. He probably took out a loan from the bank. He's like, yo, I gotta make a music video. Here's the return on the music video. Oh, cool. Okay, the bank's like, all right, bet here. Here's 100,000. Just go throw it around. I don't know. Have fun. Don't lose any of it. Give it back to me, or else you owe me money. So that's exactly what happens in music video. I just revealed the whole music industry. They just borrow a bunch of cash. They have to pay back maybe like 1% interest. Music video does crazy, right? People are like, oh, you have so much money. I'm gonna watch. That's cool. Let me buy some merch. He makes like 4 million off of that one music video. He's like, okay, here bank. Here's $1,000 off the 4 million I just made. Thanks. And then since he's made 4 million, now in the next one he can be like, oh, look, I have $4 million of income. Let me borrow 20 million. The bank's like, yeah, sure. Look, you're making money. You made money with us last time. This is how credit score works, by the way. You made money with us last time. We believe you. Your credit score is high. Here's 20 million. Now Lil Durk has 20 million. Yeah. He's pretty lit. He buys a new mansion, but then his income stops, and then he's just broke. House is no longer his. Bank's like, oh, you're not really paying anything. You're not giving all the payments you said you give us back. Where's the 20 million at, bro? We just gotta take your house because that's worth 20 million, and now you're homeless. That's your fault. Have fun. If you want to borrow $1,000 from us because now your income is zero, cool. We'll work something out. That's how most rappers go broke, by the way. So, yeah, no one owns anything. The money you have is not yours. But if you want to get rich, that's the exact way you could get rich. By investing in things, in stocks or pieces of business, so that technically the net worth under your name, under the name Beneet Singh, gets rich. But any moment, and this is rare, right? This almost never happens. At any moment, if that business just vanishes randomly, it's no longer mine anymore. So, this kind of ties everything back together. If you have a bank that is giving out money, right? Now you know how banks work. Now you know how businesses work. Now you know how money flows like water, right? It's very fluid. It goes everywhere. Now you want to figure out, where can I stand to get all the money, all the water I can get? Ideally, you'd want to go to an ocean. These oceans are businesses. You want to get rich? Business. Open up something, or just go into it and just try. Doesn't matter if you don't know what a good idea is. In the start, even though I told you that, it really matters what you work on, who you work with, and how you do it matters. In the start, you have to put volume in because you don't know what is good. You don't know what is bad. You have to learn. Take education, get specific knowledge, something that cannot be trained. Think about it like this. If it can be trained at a school, it's not specific knowledge. Anyone can come in and replace you with it. So let me give an example. If you are an aspiring software engineer, right? You might think, oh, software engineer gets paid $100,000 per year. Wow, right? But how many software engineers are there? I think right now it's one of the most demanding skills in most universities. Like that's what most degrees are like what people get. It's in software engineering. It's where computer science, right? People really want to go into that. But if you have a lot of software engineers, it's just people keep on getting those degrees. The price for software engineers decrease because there's just so many. You can get away with the Chinese worker who wants to get paid 80,000 because he just wants to come to America. But you are American. You're like, okay, no, I want 100,000. Let's just import the Chinese guy, right? If you're a business, you're like, okay, let's just get the Chinese guy, right? Because he's willing to take 80,000. It's good for him, right? Chinese guy moves in, comes on a H-1B visa, right? Just moves into the country. The Company can kick him out anytime he wants. But the Chinese guy is a hard worker. He understands what got him to America and he doesn't want to lose his chance of leaving. You can be replaced if you're a software engineer. What skill is something that you can develop that cannot be taught in school or at any educational facility? That is what you need to focus on. If you are looking for example, anything in the sales business, right? No one can teach sales. There's no formal course called sales. There's a course called business, right? I don't know what you learn in business classes. So most business teachers are broke. I don't know what they're teaching. They're gonna read out a book. Asset versus liability. Learn it. Go out. Learn it. Learn sales. Sales can be learned. It's not something that can be taught. Someone can tell you, okay, here's a technique for selling. Here's a way you can do it. But your selling technique will be unique to you. Even though most sellers have the same idea, right? Okay, here's how they sell, right? Here's how they make the sale every time. That is something that you have to do. You have to go out and do. There's no formal course on picking up girls. Sure, there's videos, right? There's like, okay, there's a pickup artist. Here's how you do it. So firstly, you gotta grab her by the arm. Then you gotta pull her towards you. No, you just gotta go and you gotta try it. Doesn't matter how bad it is. Doesn't matter what happens. You just go out and you talk. That is specific knowledge. You know something that you can't really teach to anyone. You can't really put into principles because it's just so specific. You just learn through volume. You never learn through just principles. Think about math, right? If I wanted to teach you 1 plus 1, right? Let's say 1 plus 1, right? 1 plus 1 equals 2. Right, I can show you it. I know it's a principle. It's a basic fundamental principle. Anyone can learn that. Anyone can learn that force equals mass times acceleration. If I all of a sudden started pushing something and how heavy it was and how fast I pushed really changed how fast it was moving, then that's something I learned through my own skill. But someone can put that into a principle. No one can put sales into a principle. No one can put storytelling into a principle, even though some people have tried. They say, oh, this is the best storytelling technique. Oh, this is the most best idea that you can write your story. Sure, there's a general essay format. There's a general storytelling format. But there's not one that stays consistent over time. And that's what you need to put most of your money into. Most of your time, your money, and your energy into. Is learning a specific skill that cannot be replaced. Something that a Chinese person cannot come along and be like, oh, I got a degree for this, and I'm willing to take less money for it. Here you go. Then all of a sudden it just becomes a downhill spiral. Then it turns into what IT jobs were in the early 2000s. Everyone wanted to go into IT because it was booming. It was going crazy. Now people at call centers get paid like 20,000. I don't know. They're broke. They don't make any money. What's it called? People who say, oh, computer support, the Indian guys. You can get an Indian guy to do your computer support. That's what was demanded in 2000s. Indian guy will take 5 rupees, which is like 3 cents. 3 cents, oh yes, I will fix your Windows problem for you. No problem. In 5 minutes it's done. But in the past, people were willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars per year for that same service. Now it's a scam. It's considered a prank. Do something that cannot be replaced, and do that within a business. Businesses cannot be replaced. Offer something to the world at scale that they didn't know they yet needed. This is all from Naval Ravikant on Twitter. Check him out. Money is like water because it's always moving. As we saw with the SVB failure, as we saw with the AI studio company, there was always something that was moving. It was money. And if you stand at the right place, you open the right business, you do the right things, you work with the right people, you have specific knowledge you apply with leverage, with something that's important to work on, you will get rich every time in every universe. Think about it like this. If you did the same thing over and over and over in 100 parallel universes, what do you need to do to make it so that you get rich in every single one of them? If you worked at it for as long as you think you can. Because even though time is not money, as I mentioned before, if you worked on it for 15 years, let's just say absolute worst case scenario. Let's say you were literally disabled in some parallel universe. You were disabled. You could not work more than 1 hour per week. If you did that for 15 years, would you still get rich? If your answer is yes to that question, you will be rich. And it won't be in 15 years if you think that that disabled person can do it, because you're going to put in more work. You're going to put in more effort because you're not disabled. Mr. Beast had Crohn's disease. Keep that in mind. He had to literally poop every hour or something. Now he runs the biggest YouTube empire in the world. He makes, what is it, 50 million? 100 million per month? Per month. A guy who started out with Crohn's disease, introverted, shy in his bedroom, broke. He has specific knowledge. He knows the way videos are made. And he applies it to a business which he has literally all the equity in. He owns most of his business. And that's how he gets rich. He understands money is water. He understands time is not money. The videos he makes are not time-based. It's based on effort. And you can figure it out too. Good luck.